Testing. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Let's do testing, no more testing.
Có mặt tại Quận Cam hôm nay đều có mặt hôm nay. Quý vị thấy chức vị đại sứ Mỹ tại Việt Nam rất là có giá đối với cái đồng bào người Việt chúng ta tại hải ngoại. Ai cũng thích gặp mặt ông đại sứ, xem ông đại sứ như thế nào. Rất nhiều người ít khi có mặt trong những cái event của cộng đồng như hôm nay đều có mặt đến áo quần rất là đẹp đẽ. Đây là một cái niềm vinh dự cho ông đại sứ Mỹ tại Việt Nam. Và không biết đồng hương của chúng ta sẽ hỏi gì ông đại sứ, không biết đón nhận cái gì mà quá đông thôi là đâu.
Và chúng tôi xin giới thiệu kế tiếp là nữ nhân buổi là Laura Sanchez cũng như là ông đại sứ Pedro. The community town hall in welcoming U.S. Ambassador to Vietnam, the Honorable Ted Osiris. Without further delay, let's go ahead and start the program. Chúng tôi xin phép được bắt đầu ngay chương trình gặp gỡ ngày hôm nay để chúng ta không mất thêm thời gian của quý báo của tất cả quý vị. Vâng, thưa tất cả quý vị, trước hết xin cho phép chúng tôi được giới thiệu thành phần của các vị dân cử có mặt ngày hôm nay. I'd like to first acknowledge the presence of our dignitaries, elected officials who are here with us today. Aside from the member of Congress that we just introduced and the ambassador, we also see the presence of the mayor of the city of Westminster, where we are, Mayor Truy Thanh. We also see a member of the City Council of Westminster. We have Mayor Pro Tem Sergio Contreras. We have Councilwoman Margie Rice. We have Councilwoman Emma Kelly. From our next door city, we also have the presence of Mayor of City of Garden Grove, Mayor Bao Nguyen. We have Council Member Phat Bui. Và Nghị viên Phat Bui cũng là Chủ tịch Cộng đồng Người Việt Quốc gia Nam Cali. Xin chào mừng. Let's introduce from the City of Farm Valley, Council Member Michael Vell. From the Westminster School District, Trustee Jameson Powell. From the Garden Grove Unified School District, Trustee Vice President Mr. Whitlam. And if I miss any elected official, please let me know. And a reason I want to give them a special attention is that we also have the presence with us, Dr. Prisky, the President of the Board of Coast Community College District. And we also have the presence of Dr. Adrian, the President of Coastline Community College. We have the presence of Vice President Ms. Christine Nguyen of Coastline Community College. And we were introducing earlier already, but just want to give him an acknowledgement. I'm sorry, I apologize. I just saw State Senator Jalen Nguyen just came in. And I'd like to introduce the former State Senator, Lou Correa. State Senator, Lou Correa. And we have the President of the City of Westminster, Mayor Pro Tem Sergio Contreras. And we have the President of the City of Farm Valley, Council Member Michael Vell. From the Westminster School District, Trustee Jameson Powell. From the City of Farm Valley, Council Member Michael Vell. From the City of Westminster, City Council Member Lou Correa. And we have Council Member Lou Correa. And without further ado, I'd like to bring up Westminster Mayor Trita to have a few words of opening and to introduce Congressman Lowenthal. Mayor Trita.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the City of Westminster, it's my honor to welcome Ambassador Osiris, Member of Congress, and all of you to the Lee Child Center in the City of Westminster. First, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Congressman Alan Lowenthal for organizing this town hall meeting to give all of us an opportunity to have a direct dialogue with Ambassador Osiris. I truly believe that there will be many concerns from the community regarding human rights and religious freedom in Vietnam. I also want to thank Congress members Ed Royce, Dana Rodebecher, and Loretta Sanchez for being here with us and supporting the community to fight for human rights. It is my honor to share to you all that we're so lucky to have a good Congress member, Alan Lowenthal. He had a strong commitment to voice his concerns about human rights, and he stands for the community. With that, it's my honor to introduce our freedom fighter, Congressman Alan Lowenthal.
Thank you, Mayor Trita, for those wonderful remarks in this introduction. It's a great honor for me to be here to have this town hall meeting in the great city of Westminster. Thank you, and thank everyone here for coming to this town hall as we welcome our United States Ambassador to Vietnam, the Honorable Ted Osiris. This is better. Welcome, Ambassador, to Little Saigon, the home of the largest Vietnamese community outside of Vietnam. We're so honored, as you've already heard, the local officials that are here. I'm not going to go through it again, but all the city officials and the school board for being here, because they understand that this is such an important meeting for us to have the opportunity to speak to our United States Ambassador. And I also want, before I go too much further, to thank and acknowledge Coastline Community College for their wonderful hospitality, to the board president of the Coast Community College District, Dr. Lorraine Prinsky, my friend, also to Dr. Loretta Adrian, the president of Coastline Community College, and also to Christine Wynn, who is the vice president. Thank you for your support. Thank you for letting us use these facilities. We are truly, truly honored.
Congressman, if I would just quickly recap real quick. Kính thưa tất cả quý vị, trước cửa Alan Lowenthal trước hết chào mừng tất cả quý vị đến buổi gặp gỡ ngày hôm nay, cũng như là cảm ơn ngài đại sứ Ted Osiris, đại sứ Hoa Kỳ tại Việt Nam đã ghé thăm Little Sài Gòn, là thủ đô của người Việt ở hải ngoại lớn nhất ở ngoài Việt Nam. Và chúng ta cũng rất là vui có sự hiện diện của các viên biểu Hoa Kỳ, và xin cảm ơn một lần nữa đến lãnh đạo cũng như là các ủy viên của học khu Đại học Coastline đã bảo trợ cho cái buổi gặp gỡ ngày hôm nay.
I have the honor today of hosting Ambassador Ted Osiris. Ever since Ambassador Osiris was confirmed, he's worked closely with me to ensure that human rights are the top priority of the embassy in Hanoi. I met the ambassador when he was actually being sworn in. I went to the State Department when he was being introduced as the new ambassador and being sworn in. The first thing we talked about that day was human rights, and the ambassador committed to coming here as his first visit to talk in Little Saigon about what is going on. And so I think we owe the ambassador a warm welcome. So I'd like
Dịch sơ một đoạn thôi là từ ngày mà ngài tổng thống ngài đại sứ Theodosius được tổng thống Hoa Kỳ Barack Obama bổ nhiệm đến đây để trở thành đại sứ Hoa Kỳ tại Việt Nam, thì dân biểu Alonso đã gặp ngài đại sứ và đã nói về vấn đề nhân quyền, và ngài đại sứ đã nhận lời ngay lúc đó là sẽ đến thăm Little Saigon ở một cái cơ hội sớm nhất, cũng như là ông rất là cảm ơn đại sứ Theodosius đã từ đó đến đây đã làm việc rất là gần với lại dân biểu Alonso về lĩnh vực nhân quyền tại Việt Nam, và ngày hôm nay ông ra sẽ cho chúng ta biết những gì đang xảy ra ở Việt Nam.
You know, this year marks many, many milestones. Obviously, one of the major milestones for all of us is that this is the 40th anniversary of the fall of Saigon during Black April. We don't forget these events. They have shaped who we are, and they mean so much to our community. But we're also here to look forward. How do we begin together to remember the past, to fight for human rights, but also to begin a real reconciliation process between the diaspora, all the people that fought for freedom, left Vietnam, and what's going on in Vietnam today. So we are here today to forge a new beginning, and that's why we have invited the ambassador.
Vâng, thưa quý vị, chúng tôi xin phép là chắc cái chương thời để mà tiết kiệm thời gian thì chắc chúng ta cũng xin phép quý vị chúng ta giới hạn cái vô tay để chúng ta tiếp tục cái bài viên văn để chúng ta dành nhiều thời gian lát nữa đây cho quý vị đặt câu hỏi. Xin cảm ơn quý vị. Kính thưa quý vị, năm nay đánh dấu 40 năm kể từ khi ngày chế độ miền Nam Việt Nam Cộng Hòa bị bất tử, cũng như là Sài Gòn thất thủ đã 40 năm, cũng như là năm nay cũng là một cái năm có rất là nhiều cái dấu ngoặc lịch sử, những cái dấu mốc lịch sử, và chúng ta không có quên những cái sự kiện quan trọng đó trong lịch sử của chúng ta, và chúng ta vẫn sẽ tiếp tục tranh đấu vì nhân quyền tại Việt Nam. Nhưng mà đồng thời chúng ta cũng sẽ nhìn tới tương lai để những gì chúng ta có thể làm được để chúng ta tiếp tục cái công cuộc tranh đấu này. Và đối với các vị dân cử cũng như là ông đại sứ Theodosius, làm sao tiếp tục tranh đấu đại diện cái tiếng nói của cộng đồng người Việt ở hải ngoại này.
You know, as we all know, everyone in this room knows, Vietnam continues to trample religious freedom. It does not allow for peaceful dissent. It holds countless prisoners of conscience. Yet also at the same time, Vietnam is asking for greater and closer relationships to the United States. And there is no more important part of that discussion than for us to stand up if we want that relationship, if they want that relationship, to fight for human rights in Vietnam, which does not exist today. And so that's why we're here.
Hiện nay chính quyền Việt Nam đang rất là muốn gia tăng thương mại với Hoa Kỳ qua như là cái hiệp ước TPP, nhưng đồng thời Việt Nam còn là một quốc gia không tôn trọng nhân quyền cũng như là đàn áp những cái quyền căn bản của người dân. Cho nên đây là cái cơ hội mà lúc mà chúng ta cần phải nói với chính phủ Việt Nam là chúng ta không chấp nhận cái đó, và chúng ta cùng đứng lên để tranh đấu vì nhân quyền tại Việt Nam.
You know, it's all of our duty, and I'm not just talking about those up here, the elected officials. It's everybody's duty to call for Vietnam to respect human rights. And I will continue to fight and work with my colleagues in the Congress and to work with the ambassador to make sure that the Vietnamese government hears our concerns. And that's why we're here to have this dialogue today. I'm very thankful that the ambassador has come to visit us and hear our concerns, and I look forward to what he has to say.
Cho nên đây không phải là chỉ là một cuộc tranh đấu cho các vị dân cử ở trên đây thôi, mà đây là một cuộc tranh đấu chung của tất cả mọi người, cùng có cái sự tham gia của tất cả mọi người ở đây, và chúng ta sẽ cùng nhau tranh đấu cho những cái giá trị mà chúng ta tin vào, như là giá trị nhân quyền, và làm sao chúng ta tranh đấu cho người dân Việt Nam thực sự có được nhân quyền ở tại Việt Nam.
You know, at this time I'm going to invite my colleagues in the United States Congress to provide their opening remarks. You know, all the members of the United States Congress that are here today are no stranger to our community. They have all been tirelessly working for the Vietnamese American community here in Little Saigon. They've been great friends, they've been champions for the community on many issues, and particularly, as we all know, on human rights and democracy for Vietnam. First, I would like to invite to come up to speak my dear friend and the chair of the committee that I serve on the chair of Foreign Affairs, Chairman Ed Royce. And before he comes up, I'd just like to say, frequently, and I mentioned this at lunch, frequently people talk about the United States Congress as being not able to get things done, to be dysfunctional. And I'm not going to get into that argument, but I will tell you there is one committee in the United States Congress where we work together, where we have great leadership, and where Democrats and Republicans are proud to be members of that committee, and that is the leadership of Congressman Ed Royce, and I am pleased to introduce my friend, the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Congressman Ed Royce.
Vâng, thưa quý vị, chúng tôi sau đây sẽ tới phần phát biểu của các vị dân biểu Hoa Kỳ có mặt trong cái buổi gặp gỡ ngày hôm nay. Và trước khi chúng tôi đến phần của dân biểu, I would also like to acknowledge that Congressman Dana Barker just entered the room. Và dân biểu đây là Barker của đến chúng ta. Và sau đây xin mời quý vị chào đón ông dân biểu Ed Royce, là chủ tịch của Ủy ban Ngoại giao Hạ viện Quốc hội Hoa Kỳ. Dân biểu Ed Royce.
Nice to see everyone here today, and let me welcome the ambassador, Ted Osius, here to Orange County, and let me say also that it is wise that he is here in Orange County, California, because the best input, the best advice, I think, can be obtained from the Vietnamese community here. Vietnamese American community has given me over the years tremendous insight, and I want to thank State Senator Janet Nguyen here with us for a lot of her ideas in terms of what we can do to change the situation in Vietnam. Because I think all of us that have looked at the problem, realize that the fundamental answer to this is to have a government in Hanoi that respects the human rights, the religious freedom, the right of a democratic system in Vietnam.
Vâng, chúng tôi xin dịch sơ cái lời phát biểu của dân biểu Royce. Trước hết ông ta chào mừng đại sứ Ted Osius đã đến thăm Little Sài Gòn, và ông ta nghĩ rằng đây là một cái sự lựa chọn rất là tốt, vì tại Little Sài Gòn, Orange County này là nơi mà ông sẽ lắng nghe được rất là nhiều cái ý kiến chính đáng, rất là nhiều cái ý kiến quan trọng về cái mối quan hệ song phương giữa Hoa Kỳ và Việt Nam, cũng như là ông ta nói là đối với ông cái vấn đề căn bản, và cái vấn đề căn bản nhất tại Việt Nam là một cái chính quyền không có tôn trọng nhân quyền, cũng như là một cái chính quyền đàn áp những cái quyền căn bản của người dân Việt Nam, và đó đối với ông là cái vấn đề căn bản mà chúng ta đang đối diện phải.
I spent time in Eastern Germany years ago on an exchange program, and I saw the impact that the broadcasts were having on young East Germans. And I think we can do this without translation. I think people understand conceptually here what was happening in East Germany as a consequence of Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and of VOA. And those broadcasts were increasingly moving that society in a way in which they were demanding political freedom. And you could actually see it across the cities in Eastern Germany. You could see it all over Eastern Europe. And the consequences of that was to create a new environment in which change came. Now, this is what I want you to think about. We have had years of pressuring the government in Vietnam, and I've carried a lot of legislation to do it. But the reality is that they are still today, if you ask Human Rights Watch, they are still treating political prisoners the same way they were. They're treating people, in the words of Human Rights Watch, like animals, putting them in cells, if they're political prisoners, and putting them in those cells with hardened criminals, and encouraging the criminals to beat up the students who might have blogged about human rights. The time has long since come for us to use Radio Free Asia, and I've carried a lot of legislation to get the transmitters up and broadcasting into Vietnam, but we need to use that as a tool in real time, every day, the same way we did in Poland and in East Germany and in Czechoslovakia, to give the truth to the people in Vietnam about human rights, about religious liberty, about the way they're being mistreated, in order to put pressure on that government. Why? Because today, when you see the polling coming out of Vietnam, you see that 92% of the people in Vietnam want closer ties with the United States. Closer ties with the United States. When they contrast that question, do you want to see closer ties with Beijing or closer ties with the United States of America? You see a lopsided number, with 70% of the people saying, we want those ties with the United States. That's what people understand. Why? Because it's the values here. It's freedom of speech. It's freedom of religion. It is the foundation of this system. That's what we need to be teaching in Vietnam. That's what we need to be broadcasting. And that is why I am so glad the ambassador is here. Because yes, as Alan said, the fundamental first principle has to be that we in the United States stay true to our first principle, which is human rights. And we need to find ways also, if we can figure out a way to open the internet in Vietnam so that U.S. internet search engines have the ability to go into that system in Vietnam. And there is the possibility of us doing that. There is the possibility now of us doing that. If we can push for labor standards in Vietnam so that there are labor unions in Vietnam, if we can push for environmental changes in Vietnam so that you don't have a situation where Beijing sends down a couple of people in the People's Liberation Army, they cut a deal with somebody in the government in Vietnam, and all of a sudden you see strip mining in the Central Highlands. And all of a sudden you see a closing of the water table. Well, these are the things that we need to negotiate and push for in Vietnam. And frankly, at the end of the day, the ultimate point is freedom of speech. The ideals is what is so powerful. I watched young East Germans who had been mesmerized by the propaganda from the state change their opinion of the future they wanted for themselves. And I know that if this community stays engaged, just as when I was a younger man, people told me, oh, things are not going to change in East Germany. Oh, yes, they did, and in Poland, and in the Czech Republic, and they will change in Vietnam. Let's make sure it changes in Vietnam. Thanks for staying engaged. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, my colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Parker. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Royce, for inspiring us. Next, I'd like to invite Congresswoman Loretta Sanchez, who is the co-chair of the Congressional Caucus on Vietnam. I'm in my second term in the Congress. This is my third year. And when I came to the Congress, I looked for mentors. There has been no greater champion of human rights and speaking out for the people of Vietnam, for democracy, for freedom, than my dear friend, Congresswoman Loretta Sanchez. And I am honored to call her my friend.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I want to thank you, Alan, for putting this together. I don't know if the ambassador knows this, but back in 1997, when I took the seat here of the district, we actually invited the first ambassador, United States ambassador, to Vietnam to come and hold, and we held the first community forum right here in the Little Saigon area. That was Pete Peterson. And you were there. You were there in Hanoi during that time. And I now saw a little birdie told me last night that you had a frank discussion with many of our wonderful Vietnamese Americans here, and that things can get tough when we have these discussions about what is really happening in Vietnam. And I've got to tell you that Pete Peterson, he had an earful when he came 18 years ago. We haven't stopped that. Since then, we've had ambassadors Berghardt, Marin, McCulloch, Scheer, and now you. And so it's a tradition, and it's a tradition to hear from the Vietnamese American community. And the reason we do this is because your family members are this tie to our families in Vietnam makes it the utmost importance for our community to fight for human rights. We would fight for human rights for everybody in the world. But when it's our family, even more so, we are impatient to see progress. So in the year 2000, the embargo came down. We gave normal trade relations to Vietnam. President Clinton went to sign the trade agreement. I know, I was standing next to him as a symbol of the desire for human rights. Then we put Vietnam, the government, not the people, the government, on particular countries of concern for their egregious ways of going after religious leaders and religious institutions in Vietnam. And then President Bush cleared that so that we would agree to Vietnam going into the World Trade Organization. I was against all of these moves, I have to tell you, but it happened. And every time the Vietnamese government said they were going to be better about human rights. That's what they said. Clinton, Bush. Now we come to the Trans-Pacific Agreement. And of course, the government of Vietnam says, oh, we're going to be better. But we know the truth. We know. So, how do we fight for these human rights? How do we get you, Mr. Ambassador, the power and the foundation for you to walk in and try to get these human rights? That is what we are here today to talk about. You have been there. For a long time, you have been watching Vietnam. For a long time, I have been watching Vietnam. For a long time, my colleagues have been watching Vietnam. Now you're watching Vietnam. We're more eyes on Vietnam. But how do we change the conditions of Vietnam? This is what we want to know. It's hard to stand here. I am glad that my colleague Ed Royce brought the issue of the bloggers and the internet, because I have met with the Googles and the Yahoos and all of these. to try to figure out how we keep the internet open, especially for the young people. Remember, the older we get, generalizing, the older we get, the less we decide to go to do a fight, right? Experience, time. But the young people, they are the ones that will bring about the true changes, and it must come from inside of Vietnam. So they must be connected to us, who are going to continue to push, to give them the courage to fight and to finally change what is going on in Vietnam. I would like to alert you today to a particular concern. The concern in the incident in the Hai Dong province. It frightens me to have seen this short video showing the woman's torso under the bulldozer when the protest over the land compensation of the industrial park. It frightens me that these things are happening and that the government of Vietnam is getting away with this. I know that now this victim is in the hospital and we are monitoring what is happening. But it is exactly that type of fear and recklessness that is hurting our families in Vietnam. So, I am here to say that I will continue to work with my colleagues, regardless of party, and we will continue to fight. I want you to hear from this community, because they have their ear to their families in Vietnam. And I want you to know that we are here to help you to make that fight happen, because we are here and you are there more days than not. And believe me, if I can get a visa, I will go to Vietnam.
Well, thank you, Congresswoman Sanchez, for that. Now I'm pleased to introduce Congressman Dana Rohrabacher. When I was growing up, and probably long before many of you, I watched a movie, and then there was a TV show called The Odd Couple. In The Odd Couple, there were two people that were quite different, but cared a great deal for each other and worked together. Congressman Rohrabacher and I have forged that kind of relationship. People don't understand it, but we are close friends, and I am honored. And we work together on many issues. I am honored to introduce now Congressman Dana Rohrabacher.
All right. Which one of us is odd? All right. Mr. Ambassador, I want to thank you for joining us today. And let me just note, there's nothing that's been said so far that I disagree with. And I am a very proud member of the Royce Freedom Rangers as our boss now, as the chairman of the committee, because we have made a commitment there, and Ed is providing incredible leadership. I want to point out that this is not a political issue. We're talking about the very heart and soul of our country, what we mean as Americans. We do work together, Democrats and Republicans. I point out, for example, we have Lou Correa sitting here, and let me note, he is no longer in public office, but he's here because he believed in the things that he was talking to you about when he was in public office. So, Lou, thanks for keeping your activism on these issues. So let me just go through a couple of specifics for the ambassador rather than giving you if you haven't been inspired so far by what you've heard, I'm not going to add anything to that. So let me make sure that we have some specifics down. I think that if we do move forward with a different relationship to the government in Vietnam, it has to be step by step, and we have to have steps that we can understand, measurable steps, things that they're going to have to do some things. And what I would suggest, perhaps, you start off with things that they could easily do if indeed they have a change of heart about the type of government that they want to impose in Vietnam. I would suggest, for example, Mr. Ambassador, that we have demand, number one, a list of, yes, American political prisoners, American prisoners of war that were there, and we know that they kept some after the war. This has been a phony debate as to whether they did. They kept some Americans, but they also kept thousands of Vietnamese who had allied themselves with the Americans, and we need an accounting of all those people, both the Vietnamese who were siding with us and the American troops that were there. We need an accounting of what happened to them after the war. And that's many of you folks have relatives that just disappeared, and you don't know. Well, we can bring an end to that era by putting some light on that, and they should be able to do that. Communist governments are very well known for keeping very accurate records on these people that they've murdered over the years. And number two, we need statements, just policy statements by the Vietnamese Communist Party stating that they no longer believe that religion is a hostile force within the society and that they are withdrawing their objections to religious faith. We need them to make sure that they recognize, another step, that someone has a right to an opposition newspaper. Then they can say, we believe that people should have an opposition party. And these are things that step by step they can tell us and show us that they want to have better relations with us because they're reclaiming the legitimacy of government itself. We Americans believe that government, and I say we Americans, we come from every ethnic group and every race and every religion. This place is especially proud of that. But we Americans believe that government only has the rights and the powers that are given to them by the consent of the governed. So we need to make sure that we insist that there be free newspapers, okay? Let there be a proclamation that anyone today in Vietnam that wants to have a newspaper will be free to do so. Or, its next step, if there are people who would like to organize a political party, they are free to do so. We need to have these specific announcements and pronouncements by that government. This doesn't cost them anything. If they don't intend to do it, let's not pretend to ourselves that they're going to respect human rights if they can't make these steps one little step at a time. So I'm anxious to hear from our Vietnamese American brothers and sisters here about some of the suggestions they have. That's the suggestion I have. Let's make it real. Let's have a new relationship with Vietnam, but let's not pretend that there are reforms going on when there aren't. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Congressman. And thank you all, both Congressman Rohrabacher, Congresswoman Sanchez, and Congressman Royce. I'm not going to take much more time. We are really here to listen to our ambassador, who is very gracious, coming not only just to this town hall community meeting, but spending really 3 days in Little Saigon to understand what our needs are. He's been a great champion of human rights. He has been open and responsive to our needs, and I am very, very pleased to introduce now the ambassador, also known as the president, Ambassador Ted Osius.
chào quý vị và các bạn. Cảm ơn đã mới tới đây hôm nay. Và trước hết tôi muốn giải thích tại sao tôi sẽ nói tiếng Việt với giọng Bắc. Bởi vì lần đầu tiên khi tôi đã sang đến Việt Nam, tôi đã học với một giáo viên tên là Bác Hiền, giáo viên của miền Nam. Và lúc đó tôi đã nói với giọng Nam. Và sau khi chuẩn bị lần này để trở lại đến Việt Nam, tôi đã học với 2 giáo viên của Hà Nội và họ đã dạy tôi giọng Bắc. Bây giờ xin lỗi tôi nói với giọng Bắc. Tôi có thể hiểu cả 2 giọng và miền Trung và Nghệ An và miền Tây, các giọng của tiếng Việt không sao. Và khi chúng ta có cơ hội để trao đổi ý kiến, chúng ta có thể nói bằng tiếng Anh và bằng tiếng Việt, giọng Bắc, giọng Nam. Không sao. Tôi như bà Sanchez đã nói về sếp của tôi, ông đại sứ cũ tên là Pete Peterson, và tôi rất là tôn trọng Pete Peterson. Ông ấy là ban thân và ông ấy là đại sứ tuyệt vời, và tôi cố gắng rất nhiều để theo ông ấy, và ông ấy đã tôn trọng quý vị và các bạn rất nhiều. Và đó là lý do ông ấy đã bắt đầu chuyến hôm nay để sang đây, và mỗi đại sứ đã sang đây sau đó để trao đổi ý kiến và để học nhiều của quý vị và các bạn. Tôi sẽ bắt đầu để nói một chút về nhân quyền, và sau đó tôi sẽ cố gắng giải thích tại sao tôi lạc quan về vấn đề này. First of all, in 2013, our 2 presidents of Vietnam and the President of the United States, signed a comprehensive partnership agreement. And they made a core pillar of that agreement human rights. And it is clear to everyone in the Vietnamese government that respect for human rights is the basis on which we can build a real partnership. In my embassy, everyone carries this little card. I always carry this little card. I am a human rights officer. Everyone in my embassy is a human rights officer. It's not just a job for one person. It's a job for all 900 of us in the embassy and in the consulate. And on this card is written examples of demonstrable progress on human rights. And there are specific requests that we make of the Vietnamese government. My friend Dieu Khai is here today. This card, we haven't changed it quickly enough because we were asking for his release. He's already released. But you know what? We're not satisfied if Dieu Khai is released and someone else is put in prison right behind him. That is not the way the United States works. We don't believe that you can export your problems and then fill in behind by putting more people into prison. That is not a satisfactory way for us to work. So what our request has been, and everybody understands this in the Vietnamese government, is systemic change. That means legal change. That means bringing Vietnam's laws into conformity with its international commitments and with its 2013 Constitution. Right now we're engaged in a very complicated process with Vietnam to change the criminal code and the criminal procedure code and the law on religion. Will we succeed? I don't know. I don't know whether we'll be able to have those laws changed as much as I would like or we here would like. I don't know. But I will try, and my team will try, and we will do everything we can to push the Vietnamese to keep changing those laws, to bring them in accordance with the commitments that they have made. And let me say something about the role of Congress in this process. You see here before you 4 individuals who care deeply about human rights in Vietnam. Their careers show, their records show how much they care. The administration and members of Congress don't always agree. That's okay. We don't have to agree on every point. When they write to the president, when these members of Congress write to the president, or push the president, or push the administration, it helps me. Every time I hear from you about your concerns, every time I hear from members of Congress about concerns, it helps me, because I go to the leaders of the government and I have this card and I say, it's a choice for you. You have a choice. Do you want to continue to integrate into the world community? Do you want to grow your economy? Do you want to expand your trade? Do you want to have a good trade relationship with the United States? Do you want to have a security relationship with the United States? All this is possible. Or do you want to put more people in prison? Do you want to put more bloggers in prison? What do you think will benefit your country the most? Putting some bloggers in prison or boosting your economy? Putting some bloggers in prison or making sure your young people are educated? Throwing more people in prison or having a full relationship with the greatest nation on earth, the United States? So the reason I am optimistic, there are a couple of reasons. One is how much I've seen change in 20 years. When I first went to Vietnam to work for Ông Đại sứ Pete Peterson, there was no internet. There was no civil society in Vietnam. And today, there are 40 million people in Vietnam who use the internet. There are 30 million people in Vietnam who use Facebook. We have 200,000 of those people who are connected to us at the embassy via Facebook. And I read comments every day from those people. And many of them are young people. Vietnam is a very young nation. And you know what they express to me all the time? They express their hopes for the future. They express their hopes that Vietnam will be freer and more prosperous, stronger, independent, a country that respects human rights and the rule of law. That's what they tell me every day. They don't say, oh, we would like to be more repressed. We would like to be more like China. We would like to be isolated from the world. No, that is not what those young people want. Those young people want to be connected to the world. And I think we owe them. We owe them to do as much as we can to help them to stay connected to the world. The chairman mentioned that 92% of the people in Vietnam want a closer relationship with the United States. And let me emphasize, that's 92% of the young people, 92% of the older people, 92% from Myanmar, 92% from Vietnam. There's no division on this issue. Vietnamese are not divided on whether they want a closer relationship with the United States. When they list what countries are most important to them, they say United States. And about half that number say Japan. And about half that number say Russia. And a very small number of people say China. So what does that tell me? What do the people of Vietnam are trying to decide what kind of a country that they want to have in the future. I don't think that tells me they want to be like the Chinese with less freedom. It tells me they want to be like us with more freedom. And I think that we have an obligation. I feel it very powerfully. And I feel it today in particular because I face you, because you know what the suffering has been. You know from your families, you know from your own experiences how difficult it has been. So I feel that responsibility. I feel that responsibility, and I will do all I can to keep moving forward in that direction. Why else am I Lakwang? Why else am I optimistic? See this little pin? It says 20 years. For 20 years ago, when I was working for first Chargé d'Affaires de Say Anderson, and then Pete Peterson, that's when we established diplomatic relations. This year, we have had an extraordinary number of people going back and forth between our two countries. I had the honor to host former President Clinton a few days ago. I was on that trip as well. in 2000, that historic trip to Vietnam. And I had the honor of welcoming the president and former president, and he said, you know, when we decided 20 years ago that we Americans would accept you Vietnamese, and you Vietnamese decided that you would accept us, that set us free. And I thought that was a powerful way to look at it. Now, did that set everybody free? No. No, it did not. And I think President Clinton understands that. There's still a long, long way to go, because he talked about how much progress we hope for. But 3 cabinet members from the United States have visited Vietnam this year. 7 members of the Politburo will visit the United States before the end of this year. When Nguyen Phu Trong, the Tom Bi Tu, when he went to the Oval Office, that was a first. There's never been a Tom Bi Tu of Dan Kom San who has gone to the Oval Office before, who's gone to the United States before. And when he sat in the Oval Office with the President of the United States for an hour and a half, you know what the President of the United States talked with him about? Human rights, the rights of workers, the importance of freedom of association, the importance of freedom of religion, the importance of free speech and a free internet and free exchange. I was very proud to hear my president directly, politely, but directly and firmly say that this is what needs to happen for us to have the kind of relationship that we should have. They talked about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We have some disagreements within the United States. I don't have to tell you, there are many disagreements within the United States about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. My view is that this is a tool to bring about change. It's an important tool that can bring about change in Vietnam and in all the 12 countries that are part of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We have made clear to the Vietnamese there are no 2 standards for the Trans-Pacific Partnership. There's only a high standard when it comes to labor rights or protection of the environment. There's only one standard, and it's very high, and every country must meet it. And if Vietnam wants to be part of the TPP and benefit from TPP, Vietnam has to meet those high standards too. And we have a different kind of a relationship than when I was in Vietnam working for Pete Peterson 20 years ago. 20 years ago, we had an annual trade of $450 million. This year, our annual trade surpassed $36 billion, and I think it's going to be over $40 billion next year. Last week, we concluded 2 deals that involved selling $13 billion worth of Boeing airplanes to Vietnam Air and Vietjet. But even more important than that, we have a new relationship on something that really matters for the future, and that's education. When I was first in Vietnam, there were less than 1,000 Vietnamese students who studied in the United States each year. Today, there are 17,000 young Vietnamese studying in the United States. A few days ago in New York, a license was granted to Fulbright University, Vietnam. New, American-style, not-for-profit, merit-based university where academic freedom is the absolute basis of everything that will be done. An independent board and a guarantee from the top levels, from the Tom Bi Tu, from the Chu Thich Nhat Nuc, from Mr. Zoom, that there will be academic freedom. Does that mean it will be easy to make it all happen? No. But 20 years ago, we established Fulbright Economic Teaching Program, and for 20 years, they have been teaching modern economics to officials throughout the country. Modern economics in communist country. The kind of economics that you need to understand if you want to prosper. And we have built such a strong track record with Fulbright Economic Teaching Program that the leadership of Vietnam realizes that the only way to go forward is to have transparency and accountability and be part of the world, of the global economy. And they know that there's a price they have to pay to be part of it, and I believe they are willing to pay that price. That's why I'm optimistic. Now, it's my job to be optimistic. The only way I can lead my embassy is if I'm hopeful. I know that there are going to be many, many problems. I know that there will be times that we'll go 2 steps forward and 1 step back. I know that there will be many individual problems, and I hope you will raise those with me today. And I will do my best. I promise you I will do my best. But I think that we should keep our eye on the long term. Something like Fulbright University is an investment in the future of Vietnam. And I think we should keep our eye on how that country can change over time so that its people can be happier, more free, so the country can be stronger, more prosperous, more independent, and be a country that respects the rule of law and human rights. Thank you very much.
Vâng, kính thưa quý vị, chúng tôi sẽ có cái microphone để nhận những câu hỏi của quý vị, và quý vị nào cần có cái nhu cầu để thông dịch thì chúng tôi sẽ thông dịch cho, và nếu không thì cũng không cần thiết. Nhưng mà trước khi mình bắt đầu cái phần hỏi đáp, xin trước hết được sự thông cảm cũng như là của tất cả nơi đây vì số quan khách rất là đông. Cho nên nếu mà chúng tôi có thiếu sót, quên quý vị nào thì cho xin kiên nhẫn và cho chúng tôi thời gian để được phép mời các vị đó. Và để tại vì chúng ta có 2 bên quan khách đó, cho nên chúng tôi cũng sẽ mời một vị bên đây rồi mời một vị bên kia, rồi chúng tôi qua lại như thế nào. Và chúng tôi cũng xin phép là quý vị nào chúng tôi thấy trước thì chúng tôi sẽ đặt câu hỏi vào trước. Và xin trước hết tôi lúc nãy khi chúng tôi bắt đầu tôi nhận thấy là có anh Phát Bùi cũng có giơ tay trước, cho nên chúng tôi xin được phép mời anh Bùi Thế Phát, chủ tịch cộng đồng người Việt quốc gia Nam Tây xin, và chúng tôi cũng xin phép là như vậy. Vì cái thời gian ngày hôm nay chúng ta cũng rất là giới hạn, cho nên khi quý vị đặt câu hỏi chúng tôi có một cái yêu cầu là nếu được quý vị đi trực tiếp vào đặt cái câu hỏi của quý vị, thay vì có cái phần phát biểu rồi đặt câu hỏi, vì chúng ta không có thời gian cho cái phần phát biểu, cho nên xin phép quý vị là giúp cho ban tổ chức trực tiếp đặt câu hỏi của quý vị để chúng ta dành nhiều thời gian cho câu hỏi. Xin cảm ơn quý vị và xin mời anh Bùi Thế Phát có câu hỏi đầu tiên.
Vâng, và để theo đúng cái yêu cầu của anh Lý Tĩnh Phong và ban tổ chức, chúng tôi sẽ bỏ cái phần phát biểu và chúng tôi xin gửi cái phần phát biểu đó cho ông đại sứ Chad Oshus, và chúng tôi đi thẳng vào vấn đề đặt câu hỏi. I will do this in English so that the member of the Congress can follow us as well. We do not need to talk about the continuing violation of human rights and the grave condition of millions of people in Vietnam, because that we already know. We do not need to talk about that. But here's our concern. There have been very little progress. Of course, there are a lot more trade, and as you mentioned, $37 billion in between the Vietnamese, between Vietnam and U.S. And there are many more tall buildings comparing to before 1975. Yes, we acknowledge that. But outside of that, there have been very little progress in human rights, in the basic freedoms, especially the freedom of religion and freedom of the press, freedom of assembly. We know very clear that the trade, the prosperity that bring about by the trade between Vietnam and U.S. only benefit a very few, maybe $1 million. But what about the benefit for the other 89 million people, the poor people, the people who do not have, who's incapable of defending themselves with the oppression of the secret police and the dictator government? So my question is this: crime is a good thing, but it will not bring about important changes. We got to have carrot and a stick. We got to have penalties in the TPP, so that if the Vietnam government continue to break their promises, as they have always done with the WTO, what will you do in order to assure that?
Trước khi ngài đại sứ trả lời câu hỏi, chúng tôi cũng xin nhắc quý vị đặt câu hỏi là chúng tôi sẽ rất là yêu cầu quý vị giới hạn cái 30 giây để đặt cái câu hỏi của mình, và chúng tôi sẽ giữ nguyên cái nguyên tắc đó để chúng ta có nhiều cái thời gian. Xin mời đại sứ Theodosius.
For one thing, every single chapter of the Trans-Pacific Partnership has a provision for enforcement. They have strong enforcement provisions. You can't keep reaping the benefits of the Trans-Pacific Partnership unless you fulfill your commitments. That's true whether it's environment, it's true whether it's labor, it's true no matter what. But I would take a little bit of an issue with your overall characterization of trade having no effect on the way people's lives are lived. I think the fact that we have had an opening between our two countries, that we've had normalization, that we've had the bilateral trade agreement and included Vietnam in the World Trade Organization, has had an impact. It's not as much as we would like. There is nowhere near as much religious freedom as we would like. There's terrible restrictions on freedom of speech. But one thing that is changing, and I think this is very important, there was no civil society before to speak of. There were only very tightly monitored groups. Now there is a civil society that is growing in Vietnam, and there are these connections that people have via the internet that allow them to speak more freely than ever before. There is a risk in engaging. We take a risk when we decide that we're going to engage economically with Vietnam because they might not fulfill all of their commitments. My belief, and there's disagreement in the leadership of the United States on this, but my belief is that risk is worth taking. That engagement is a risk worth taking, and that if you tie our two peoples together more through the private sector, through more tourists going back and forth, more students going back and forth, we're pushing very hard for direct flights between our two countries. If you have a direct flight between Los Angeles and Saigon, and more people passing back and forth, do you think that will have an impact on Vietnam society? I think it will. You are right to point out that the benefits from this trade are not shared equally. One of the things I worry about is that today in the development of Vietnam's economy now, there are some very wealthy people. There are a small number of very wealthy people who control a big part of the economy. And I think that's a worrisome trend. The Vietnamese, when they think about what kind of economy they'd like to have, they often look to South Korea as an example. Well, South Korea has chaebols. They have conglomerates controlled by just a small number of people. That's a little bit worrisome. But you know what South Korea also has? It has enormous connectivity, absolute freedom of speech, freedom of expression. The reason it's a successful economy is they allow innovation. They allow people to share ideas. And I hope that's a lesson that Vietnam can continue to learn. And again, I'm optimistic. I think the future will get better and better for the people of Vietnam.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. We have a question here from the back.
Dạ, tôi xin đặt câu hỏi. Tôi xin nói bằng tiếng Việt, các quý vị dịch dùng bằng tiếng Anh. Tôi muốn hỏi thưa ngài đại sứ là trong vấn đề mà nhân quyền, hỏi về 20 triệu người lính Việt Nam Cộng Hòa đã hy sinh trong cuộc chiến Việt Nam, và số phận của nghĩa trang quân đội á, thì chính phủ Mỹ có một cái kế hoạch nào để vận động chính phủ Việt Nam xây dựng lại cái nghĩa trang quân đội và công nhận sự hy sinh của tất cả các chiến binh Việt Nam Cộng Hòa là sự hy sinh của những người đã bảo vệ Tổ quốc, chứ không phải là một cái phía mà được xem là sai trái hay là theo đế quốc Mỹ như họ vẫn từng tuyên truyền ngày xưa.
Yeah, well, the question is, Mr. Ambassador, as you know, more than 1 million South Vietnamese servicemen and women have died fighting in the war, and until today, the final resting place for them, the Bien Hoa National Cemetery, has still been an issue. What will you do and the U.S. Embassy will do to address the issue with the government of Vietnam so that they finally restore the Bienhua Cemetery and recognize that these people, they die fighting for their country, fighting for what they believe in, and not just fighting for the U.S. imperialists as they always their propaganda in Vietnam. So what would you do to address the issue of the cemetery?
Cảm ơn rất là nhiều cho câu hỏi này. Congressman Lowenthal just visited the Bien Hoa Cemetery. Congressman Royce and all of the colleagues that you see up here have been very active in bringing to our attention the situation in the Bien Hoa Cemetery. It is a very serious priority. The provincial officials in Bin Dung province are now responsible for the cemetery, and it's no longer the responsibility of the military. That has good and bad aspects. It means families at least have access to the cemetery and can upgrade the graves of their loved ones. But it also means there is a threat that some of the land could be sold off, and that's very serious. I have my Consul General has engaged with the Bin Dung People's Committee, saying this is a very important, more than a symbol of reconciliation. This is tremendously important. And you know what? It's consistent with the values of Vietnam to show respect for the dead. It's consistent with the values of Vietnam. It doesn't matter if it's Mien Bắc or Mien Nam. The values, giá trị của người Việt Nam is tôn trọng, is respect for your elders, respect for your ancestors. This is not limited to one side or the other in this argument. So we have come up with a strategy. First step is for me to be directly in touch with the Bin Dung People's Committee. Second step is for me to go and see them and say, this matters. If you want reconciliation, this matters. And I'm told that the leadership of Vietnam wants reconciliation. They understand that this community represents tremendous talents and energy, and that reconciliation is in the benefit of both countries. So I will do as much as I can to promote that reconciliation. Thank you.
Xin cảm ơn đại sứ. Chúng tôi xin phép được dịch rất là sơ cái ý chính của ngài đại sứ là như chúng ta cũng biết là dân biểu liên bang Alan Lowenthal đã từng ghé thăm nghĩa trang quân đội Biên Hòa, cũng như là các vị dân biểu đã nhiều lần lên tiếng về cái vấn đề nghĩa trang quân đội Biên Hòa, cũng như là về phía chính phủ Hoa Kỳ đều có cái nhìn giống như chúng ta là nếu mà thực sự chính quyền Việt Nam muốn hòa hợp, hòa giải với lại những người về khắp nơi trên thế giới thì đây là một cách mà chính quyền Việt Nam có thể chứng tỏ cái thiện ý hòa giải đó, vì cái truyền thống văn hóa của người Việt chúng ta lúc nào cũng tôn trọng những người đã hy sinh, đã nằm xuống, và đây là cái nơi mà họ có thể bắt đầu. Và về phần đại sứ Ted Osius thì ông ta sẽ đặt cái vấn đề này lên hàng đầu, và khi trở lại Việt Nam ông ta sẽ liên lạc với tiếp xúc với lại Ủy ban Nhân dân tỉnh Bình Dương, và sau đó ông ta sẽ đến gặp họ để đặt cái vấn đề này. Vì chúng ta cũng biết là nghĩa trang quân đội Biên Hòa sau khi mà đã không còn là khu quân sự nữa thì hiện nay được biến thành một cái nghĩa trang bình thường, coi như được quản lý bởi cái chính quyền địa phương, đó là Ủy ban Nhân dân tỉnh tại địa phương đó, và ông ta sẽ đến gặp họ để đặt cái vấn đề này. Xin cảm ơn đại sứ. Và chúng tôi vừa mới có câu hỏi bên đây, và sau đây chúng qua câu hỏi bên đây của chú Trục.
Kính chào ông đại sứ, kính thưa toàn thể quý vị. Tôi tên là Đinh Công Chuột, tôi là cựu tù Việt Cộng cải tạo. Thực sự tôi không có một câu hỏi nào để đặt ra với ông đại sứ cả. Cũng như tôi không có một thỉnh nguyện hay là yêu cầu gì ông can thiệp với nhà cầm quyền Việt Cộng về vấn đề nhân quyền hay là cởi mở tự do gì cả. Bởi vì những quý vị cũng biết, những việc làm này thì tất cả những vị tiền nhiệm của ông đại sứ cũng như các vị dân cử từ thượng viện, hạ viện cho tới địa phương đều đã làm những công việc này rồi đối với cái chính quyền Việt Cộng. Nhưng trước một cái áp lực nào đó thì chúng buộc lòng phải thỏa mãn những cái điều đó. Nhưng như quý vị biết, chúng thả một người thì sau đó chúng bắt cả hàng chục người. Chúng có nới lỏng về lĩnh vực này thì chúng lại siết lĩnh vực khác. Thì như quý vị biết, ví dụ như chúng thả ông Điếu Cày ra thì chúng lại bắt một số những người nữa. Do đó, với tư cách là một người đại diện cho chính phủ Mỹ cũng như đại diện cho người dân Hoa Kỳ, trong đó có chúng tôi yêu cầu ông khi ông nhận nhiệm vụ và có cơ hội tiếp xúc với những đầu lãnh của Việt Cộng thì ông hãy nói với chúng rằng cái nguyện vọng tha thiết nhất của chúng tôi là yêu cầu chúng hãy từ bỏ cái vai trò lãnh đạo đất nước, hãy nhường cái quyền lãnh đạo đất nước cho người dân.
Chúng tôi có một câu hỏi bên đây và sau đó chúng tôi đến thị trưởng thành phố cô Bảo Nguyễn này. Chúng tôi thấy chủ nhân lúc nào như chúng tôi sẽ một câu hỏi bên đây và một câu hỏi bên đây, và chúng tôi xin nhắc lại quý vị, chúng tôi yêu cầu quý vị giúp cho ban tổ chức cũng như cho mọi người đây, nếu quý vị có câu hỏi thì đặt thẳng câu hỏi chứ thay vì phục vụ chúng tôi. Xin cảm ơn quý vị và chúng tôi qua câu hỏi bên đây và sau đó sẽ đến thị trưởng thành phố Toronto.
I'm really happy that you come here today and visit the town. My name is Thuy, and I am the director of the Unforgotten documentary. I go, according to American estimate, about 165,000 South Vietnamese army prisoners have died in the Vietnamese communist prison known as a re-education camp. What will you do to help the victim of this family? That is my first question. And the second question is, how many Vietnamese army prisoners are still being held by Vietnamese government, and where are they being held now?
Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you. With regard to your second question, I don't know. I won't pretend that I know because I don't. What I know is that when we have made requests to recover the remains of those that we have lost, they have been granted. Those requests have always been granted. And what that has put in motion is a virtuous cycle of sharing information about the war. We have faced, our two nations have faced our very difficult history honestly. And so starting from when I was there 20 years ago, we focused on recovering the remains of Americans who died. And now we are exchanging information with the Vietnamese so that they can recover the remains of Vietnamese who died. And we've been very clear, it's not Vietnamese from the north or Vietnamese from the south, it's Vietnamese who died. And all of the remains should be recovered and honored and laid in a final resting place. That has been our request. It's been our consistent request for more than 20 years, and now it is being honored. It has taken time. The other way we have addressed that legacy honestly is that we have been cleaning up the Agent Orange, the dioxin hotspots that still remain in Vietnam. And we have been helping people who suffer from disabilities without regard to cause. We've been cleaning up unexploded ordnance from Quang province and from other provinces because children continue to die when they step on unexploded ordnance, and we have to stop that. And we've been working together honestly. I don't think two countries have ever done more to address honestly the effects of war than our two countries. It's been a painful effort at times, but it's a sincere effort on our part, and it has been received as a sincere effort. And I think it's created the possibility for a different kind of relationship in the future. You spoke about those who died in re-education camps. Again, I would say it is not a northern value or a southern value. It's a Vietnamese value to show respect for those who were lost. It's a Vietnamese value, and we lean on that all the time. And we must deal with the past honestly It's painful, but we have to deal with it honestly, and that's been the point I've made from the moment I arrived to my counterparts in the government of Vietnam. Thank you very much.
Mr. Ambassador, I just want to let everyone know that because we're already getting closer to it, so if we could also give the response in a brief so we could get more questions. Now, before I invite Mayor Baumann, I also want to make an announcement to members of the press and media. I know some of you have been asking me to ask questions. After this town hall, we have a roundtable time reserved for media and press. So afterward, we'll invite you to a separate media conference room, and you could hold on to your question, and we'll invite you afterward. And Mayor Baumann.
Great, thank you, Mr. Ambassador. First off, as a openly gay American mayor, I applaud you for your success as an openly gay U.S. ambassador. And also, thank you. I have one question for you. How has Vietnam-U.S. relations been impacted by pro-democracy groups in the U.S. as well as in Vietnam?
It's a very good question. I think that the impact that has been the greatest has been that of exposing young Vietnamese to ideas about what's possible in the future. I think that has been often the job of bloggers, but it's been often the job of individuals on Facebook who show young Vietnamese what's possible in a world where you're able to choose what kind of government you have and express yourselves freely. Choose the way you want to worship and engage in an unimpeded way with your fellow citizens. I think great hope resides in the role of civil society in Vietnam. I've said this once and I'll say it again. Because as civil society grows in Vietnam, you start to see models of inclusive governance, where it's not just officials who are saying, this is what you will do, citizens, but it's the private sector and civil society who are saying, members of the government, we will work with you to solve problems together. That's a healthy development. It's a relatively new development. We are supporting it. The U.S. government is supporting that development, especially in the areas of environment and health, LGBT rights, disability rights. We're doing all we can to support the growth of civil society, because I think in the end it will change the kind of Vietnam that exists. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador and Mayor. We have a question on this side now from Senator Correa, and we'll come back to this side. Senator Correa.
Mr. Ambassador, again, welcome to Little Saigon. Question on enforcement, this new trade deal enforcement. A little bit of background. A couple of years ago, when I was a state senator, two of my staffers, American citizens of Vietnamese heritage, went to Vietnam. They were arrested, held for 2 days, then they were deported to Thailand. Their only transgression was possibly their activity in the United States under my state Senate flag. They did nothing wrong in Vietnam, yet they were arrested as American citizens and deported. What assurances under this new trade deal do we have that these American citizens of future that visit Vietnam will not be arrested? Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, my constitutional responsibility as Ambassador of the United States is to protect the safety and security of American citizens. I take that responsibility very seriously. So does everyone who works for me. We do everything we can to protect the safety and security of American citizens as they travel in Vietnam. We also do everything we can to make sure there's a level playing field for our businesses who are engaged in Vietnam. So actually, we don't need a trade agreement to do that. We do it already. The enforcement provisions within the Trans-Pacific Partnership are important because, as I mentioned, we're expecting high standards to be met by every member of TPP, and there's no double standard. Vietnam is the least developed of the countries in TPP. It stands to, economists say, that its GDP will grow by 30% when it joins the Trans-Pacific Partnership. That's a big benefit. But you know what? If they don't fulfill their obligations, we pull back those benefits. It's very simple. You have to implement what you've said you will implement, or the benefits end. And I think the Vietnamese have made a strategic decision. They don't want their economy owned by China. They want to have options. They want to have economic options. They'd like to engage with the 12 nations of TPP that represent 40% of global GDP. They, especially since the oil rig incident in Bien Dong last year, Vietnamese people don't want to be absolutely dominated by the Chinese. They would like us to be the number 1 investor. They would like us to be the number 1 trade partner. And I believe that's an opportunity, and we should take advantage of it.
Who pulled back the agreement?
Senator, we could respect the process, so we continue this dialogue. Thank you very much.
There's just a quick answer. There's a very strong enforcement provision. You can't get away with not implementing your commitments under the agreement.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. We have a question on this side, and
kính chào ông Nhân Biểu. Tôi có chỉ có 2 câu hỏi thôi. Thứ nhất là cho tôi xin hỏi là một người Việt Nam mà có quốc tịch Mỹ mà bị nhà cầm quyền Việt Nam cướp hết tài sản á, thì ông Nhân Biểu là một cái người đại diện cho người Mỹ đang ở Việt Nam, có những cái ông đại sứ có cái gì mà để bảo vệ cái quyền lợi cho cái người Việt Nam mà mang quốc tịch Mỹ hay không? Đó là câu hỏi thứ nhất. Câu hỏi thứ hai, chẳng hạn như tôi là một ví dụ điển hình. Dạ, không. Tôi là một ví dụ điển hình đã bị chính quyền Việt Nam, nhà cầm quyền Việt Nam lấy hết tài sản. Dạ.
Ambassador, sorry, let me translate the question. The question is what protection there are for Vietnamese who have U.S. citizenship, but their properties, their assets in Vietnam get seized by the government of Vietnam, get taken away by government of Vietnam, but they are Vietnamese with U.S. citizenship. What protection there are for them?
This is a huge problem. I had 7 senators just wrote me, wrote the president actually, but he passed the letter to me. 7 senators wrote that this has to be resolved for us to keep moving forward in this relationship. It's a very difficult problem. I also would say that it's a problem for all the churches in Vietnam. The Catholic Church used to own a great deal of property that's all been seized from the Catholic Church. It hasn't been given back. And if you want to have continued progress in Vietnam in the areas of health and education, you've got to allow churches to be able to educate people. You have to allow churches to be able to provide health services. I can't say that I know a magic wand to wave to resolve this issue. I do not. I know that it's an enormous problem. We have to do what we can to resolve as many of these issues as we can, and I'll work on it. That's all I can promise. I'll try.
Thưa chị, các chị cũng hiểu cái câu trả lời của ông đúng rồi. Xin cảm ơn chị để chúng ta tiếp tục cái câu hỏi. Xin phép chị. Ở bên đây có một cái chú có giơ tay, xin chú giơ tay lại để cháu mời chú Nhật. Dạ, xin mời chú Nhật. Dạ.
Thưa ngài đại sứ, tôi là Tâm Hòa Lê Quang Nhật, Tổng vụ truyền thông của Giáo hội Phật giáo Việt Nam Thống nhất của Hoa Kỳ. Theo chúng tôi được biết, thì tại Việt Nam hiện nay các tôn giáo vẫn bị chèn ép, khủng bố và theo dõi. Đặc biệt là trụ sở của Giáo hội Phật giáo Việt Nam Thống nhất là chùa Thanh Minh Thiền Viện, Đức Đệ tử Tăng Thống Hòa Thượng Thích Quảng Độ vẫn luôn luôn bị dòm ngó, chèn ép, và trước cửa chùa vẫn còn có công an theo dõi. Cho nên chúng tôi muốn biết là ngài đại sứ có xác nhận được cho rằng là chính quyền cộng sản tôn trọng tự do tôn giáo, mà nếu như không tôn trọng tự do tôn giáo thì ngài đại sứ có một cái phương pháp gì để can thiệp cho các tôn giáo ở Việt Nam, mà đặc biệt là giáo hội Phật giáo Việt
Và
Nam.
hiểu rõ cảm ơn lắm. Thầy đã hiểu không nên phiên dịch. We just come from this morning. We went to the Unified Buddhist Church of Vietnam, and Congressman Lowenthal, when he visited Vietnam, he met with the Most Venerable Thích Quang Do. And you know, the United States was founded on the principle of religious freedom. That is at the core of who we are. And I've traveled in Vietnam with our ambassador for international religious freedom, Rabbi Saperstein. And we continue to explain to the Vietnamese authorities, it doesn't threaten you to let people worship as they need to. It's not a threat for people to be able to worship freely. It does not bring down your government to allow temples and churches and communities of faith to operate. It's not a threat. This is a work in progress. It's very difficult. When the congressman visited Thích Quang Do, he painted a picture that was not very pretty of religious freedom in Vietnam. They're working on a law on religion, modifying the law on religion, and the good news is they want our input. And we say, you have to fulfill your international commitments. That means allowing people to worship freely, and the Vietnamese government, in modifying that law, is taking our comments into account. What will be the result? I don't know. But I see from the 20 years ago I was there until now, I see a little bit of progress. I see a little bit of progress. There are faster church registrations. I've been to the house churches. It's another religion, but I think it matters. Doesn't matter what religion. We support freedom of religion. And I've been to house churches. I've visited religious leaders in every city that I go to in Vietnam. The Vietnamese know we are watching. We care about freedom of religion, and we certainly care about the Unified Buddhist Church, and we'll keep working on it.
Vâng, xin cảm ơn đại sứ và xin câu hỏi ở đây.
Kính thưa đại sứ và welcome to United States. Kính thưa quý khán thính giả. Yeah, my name is Kelly True, and I'm a representative for the Provisional National Government of Vietnam by Prime Minister Đào Minh Quân. The first question is, on July 7, 2015, the Vice President of the United States, Obama, invited one of the criminal Vietnamese communists, Nguyễn Phú Trọng, to Washington, D.C. at the White House. The second question is, well, this is Goldman, please. Another one is, yes, let me. Okay, Prime Minister Đào Minh Quân from the asking, he sued and complained the Vietnamese communist crime to the International Criminal Court, and the President Obama, we need help. We need the help from the United States, and we haven't get responsible back. And I can have the document here. I will give it out to you. And that's my question is. And also, the treasurer, we already send the letter to the government president of Obama. Then we don't get the response back. Today I have give it to you. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you very much. I have it. Thank you very much.
Mr. Ambassador, người ta không nào phải nổi lên. Kính thưa tất cả quý vị, thực ra trong cái vai trò của chúng tôi là cái người mà phải chọn quý vị để đứng lên phát biểu, cũng giống như là đặt câu hỏi với ngài đại sứ đó. Cái vai trò này nó không có dễ, và thực ra tôi cũng không có muốn chọn cái vai trò này để làm gì, để mà được quý cô chú bác ở đây có những cái sự nghi ngờ là chúng tôi thi phi hay là chúng tôi chọn người này tại sao không chọn người kia. Cho nên lúc trước hết xin mong quý vị hiểu cho cái khó khăn của cái vai trò của chúng tôi. Cái thứ hai là tôi xin yêu cầu một lần nữa quý vị đặt câu hỏi, chỉ mỗi người một câu hỏi là tại sao? Tại vì nếu lúc nãy chúng ta đã yêu cầu tất cả mọi người như vậy, nhưng mà mình không tôn trọng nhau thì mình sẽ rất là khó có cái sự công bằng ở trong đây để mà điều hòa cái chương trình. Cho nên chúng tôi xin được phép giữ cái microphone và chúng tôi sẽ mời quý vị đặt một câu hỏi đối với ngài đại sứ để chúng ta tôn trọng nhau và cho tất cả một cái thời gian.
Do
you have any answer to the statement?
I haven't read it yet. You just gave it to me. I will read it.
So, ngài đại sứ sẽ đọc. Dạ vâng, xin cảm ơn ông và xin mời cô đến vị.
Tôi công dân Mỹ Victoria Kim, thay mặt cho Hàng Triệu Liên bang Việt Nam xin đề nghị với lại ngài đại sứ là chúng tôi đến đây là để dùng cái nói sự thật để gìn giữ, bảo vệ và xây dựng nước Mỹ này, và xin đề nghị là ngài đại sứ nói với tổng thống luôn là không có ai được quyền lấy tiền thuế và cái lá phiếu của chúng tôi mà đi tiếp tay với tội ác của bọn cộng sản, bọn khủng bố đang cầm quyền tại một chỗ Việt Nam. Như thế là như thế câu hỏi nè, thì như thế là đồng phạm đồng lõa về đất nước Mỹ sẽ bị gặp những tai họa tai ương như vậy, chúng tôi không muốn. Và xin đề nghị câu hỏi đây, xin ngài đại sứ, những người dân ở trong một tù người ta đứng lên, người ta liều chết, người ta viết đơn tố cáo tội ác chứng cướp nhân quyền và tiêu diệt chánh pháp Chúa thật Phật thật, mà gửi tới bọn cộng sản thì bị giết hại, người ta có gửi đến đại sứ quán, và xin ngài giúp dùng là chuyển tới tránh bọn cầm quyền cộng sản, đảng cộng sản và các tổ chức quốc tế, thì ngài có dám làm không? Và hay là ngài sợ giống như là cái ngài tùy viên đại sứ quán Mỹ bị đánh gần chết vì đi thăm linh mục Nguyễn Văn Ý tại ngày 11 tháng 5 năm 2011. Do vậy xin tôi rất lo lắng cho ngài, cho nên xin ngài cho.
Xin phép để chúng tôi dịch cái câu hỏi cho ngài. Xin phép để tôi dịch câu hỏi đến ngài đại sứ. Mr. Ambassador, first of all, she wanted to make a statement that please make sure the U.S. government know that U.S. taxpayer money should not be used to support a regime that does not respect human rights, that are brutal against its own citizens. So that's a statement. The question is, religious leaders who are in prison in Vietnam, when they send information on their case to the embassy, would you and embassy staff help them get the case in front of the Vietnamese government? Would you do that? That's the question.
Yes, we will do that, and we do all the time. We are most recently, for example, when we had the Human Rights Dialogue in May, we were able to go in and see Father Lee in prison. We will continue to press these cases. What I found is that when we draw attention to individual cases, the harassment goes down. So when we had the Human Rights Dialogue afterwards, there were some people who were beaten up by plainclothes police. I brought them over. I said, first we visited them in the hospital, and then I brought them over to meet with Senator McCain, who was visiting. I said, "Does this put you at greater risk?" And they said, "We're very brave people. We're very brave people." But what happened is that when we brought them over, we took pictures with them. They haven't been hassled anymore. So I believe that specific attention from the embassy to individual cases will help, and we do it all that we can. We will continue to do that.
Chúng tôi xin được phép ký dịch cái phần mà đại sứ nói là đại sứ sẽ làm cái gì. Tòa đại sứ Hoa Kỳ nói là nếu mà các vị lãnh đạo tôn giáo mà bị đàn áp mà gửi tài liệu của họ đến Bộ Ngoại giao hay tòa đại sứ, thì ngài đại sứ sẵn sàng đặt cái trường hợp của họ đối với các nhà lãnh đạo, các nhà cầm quyền cộng sản Việt Nam, cũng như là ông đã cho thấy trước đây có những cái trường hợp khi mà ông đến gặp những cái viên chức lãnh đạo của Đảng Cộng sản Việt Nam và cho họ thấy những cái hình ảnh của những người lãnh đạo tôn giáo, những tù nhân lương tâm bị đánh đập, và sau đó thì họ đã cảm thấy là những cái sự đàn áp đó nó có phần giảm đi, cho nên cái sự can thiệp của tòa đại sứ cũng có cái ảnh hưởng và ông ta sẵn sàng làm cái chuyện đó. Xin cảm ơn quý vị. Đây là một câu hỏi.
Kính chào đại sứ và tất cả quý vị. Tôi có hai câu hỏi. Câu hỏi thứ nhất, Xin ông can thiệp cho những số phận anh em chúng tôi hoạt động ở bên Lào và Bắc Việt Nam trước năm 75. Họ gia đình họ muốn biết là sống chết thế nào, như thế nào, đó là cái phần thứ nhất. Phần thứ hai là một số anh em được về tù, bây giờ họ cũng chưa được lãnh 40 ngàn ở Việt Nam, có một số tòa lãnh sự ở miền Nam can thiệp cho được lãnh, nhưng một số vẫn cực chưa được lãnh, xin ông can thiệp dùm. Thế thôi.
The question is asking for the ambassador's response to providing assistance to special forces, Vietnamese special forces that are still remain in Laos and in that region.
I don't know what forces remain in that region, so I won't pretend that I do. I can only tell you what I do know, and that is that we will do our best if we can find any evidence that there are Vietnamese special forces still remaining in the hills. We'll do as much as we can about it, but I don't know right now.
Xin cảm ơn ông đại sứ và cảm ơn ông đại sứ và rất welcome những meeting này trong tương lai của đại sứ. Còn question là nghĩ là tất cả những protest về human rights đều doesn't work. I think the Chinese behind that, behind the police department in Vietnam. So as long as
Phu Trong visited the United States, he was one of the chief skeptics in the Politburo. Just the 3 top skeptics who are considered to be the closest to China and the farthest from us have all engaged with the United States in ways that they never did before. So I don't think this is a static situation. I think it's changing, and I think we have an opportunity now to win over some of those who are most suspicious of us and most want to keep our 2 countries apart. The Vietnamese people, I mentioned, and the chairman mentioned, there's not great support within Vietnam for a closer relationship with China. There are 92% of Vietnamese who want a closer relationship with us, and the leadership has to listen to that. They have to, and they do, and that's why they're coming to the United States in record numbers, and that's why they're looking for a closer relationship with us, and it gives us an opportunity, and we need to take it.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Xin mời chú chuẩn bị đặt câu hỏi luôn.
Mr. Ambassador, my name is Richard, and I have one question. In 1972, I was a major in the 5th Vietnam Battalion Marine Corps. This battalion,
one of the Vietnam Division Marine Corps that have
we occupy the old Quang Tri citadel. We put the 3 Viet Cong division out of Quang Tri and destroy all the Viet Cong regiment in our citadel Quang Tri. Then we set up the Vietnam flag in there after 55 days and night fighting. But the Americans said we didn't know how to fight. What do you think about the Republic of Vietnam military? Thank you.
So the question is, what is your thoughts on the Republic of Vietnam military? Thank you, Mr. Ambassador.
I have greatest respect for those who fought for their country. I know that it was a very, very painful time, but I have great respect for those who tried to defend their country, those who fought in Quan Tri to defend the citadel for as long as you did. Everyone who fought for your country, I have enormous respect. So that is my view, and I'm humbled by your service. I respect what you have done, and I believe that in some ways by trying to move forward, we are honoring what you have done, and that's certainly our effort. So thank you for your service.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you for coming and meeting with the community today. I have a question for you regarding the human rights monitoring. For you to be able to monitor, you have to be able to arrange meetings with activists and bloggers. In the past, every time when that arrangement is made, and the government made every way to prevent that from happening. They cause accident. They use the police to stop the people from coming to the meeting. How do you ensure that will happen when you want to meet with someone?
Well, what I can tell you is that there's a difference in the way the government deals with us and the way it deals with other countries. When the Germans or the British or the French invite activists to come and talk with them, the police stop them. When the United States does it, that's not what happens. We get to meet with them. And members of Congress who visited have been able to meet with activists again and again, unimpeded. There is a respect on the part of the Vietnamese authorities for the United States of America that doesn't extend necessarily to other countries. We have to use that respect and continue to meet with people, continue to advocate for them, continue to support them in their activities, and maintain that respect. The reason we have this leverage is Vietnam wants two things from us: prosperity and security. And they believe that we are a better partner than anybody else if they want to be prosperous and secure. That makes this an extraordinary time where we have extraordinary leverage to make progress in these areas. It won't be progress in a straight line. There will be things that will go wrong in the future, I guarantee it. And we will do our best to get things back on track. But to me, it would be shirking our responsibility if we didn't take advantage of this extraordinary time when Vietnam needs prosperity and security from us. If we didn't use that for leverage, that would be shirking our responsibility.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. We have a question on this end.
Dạ, kính chào ngài đại sứ. Tôi có thể nói bằng tiếng Việt Nam tại tôi nghĩ ngài hiểu được tiếng Việt Nam. Và cùng chào tất cả quý vị dân biểu và quý vị quan khách. Và tôi tên là Phạm Thị Diệu Chi. Tôi là hội trưởng của Hội Phụ Nữ Dấn Thân. Thì tôi có một câu hỏi kính xin ngài đại sứ có thể giúp đỡ dùng là trong ngày xưa trong cuộc chiến Việt Nam, tất cả những người dân Việt Nam đều tin tưởng rằng nước Mỹ là một đất nước rất là chính nghĩa và rất là có tự do, và chúng tôi đã hoàn toàn tin tưởng cái điều đó. Thì ngày nay với bao nhiêu chục năm thống trị của Đảng Cộng sản, họ tuyên truyền rằng người nước Việt Nam Cộng hòa chúng tôi là chỉ là những người đi theo đế quốc Mỹ, và chúng tôi là những người đánh thuê cho Mỹ, và cái sự nhục nhã đó người Việt Nam chúng tôi vẫn còn uất ức cho tới bây giờ. Bây giờ người Mỹ trở lại, mong rằng cái chính nghĩa của đất nước Mỹ có thể nào giúp được cho dân tộc Việt Nam, đem lại cái niềm tin rằng nước Mỹ sẽ là đem chính nghĩa, nghĩa là không còn cái chế độ bạo tàn cộng sản, và chúng tôi sẽ luôn luôn lúc nào cũng là kính phục nước Mỹ, bởi vì đó là một cái đất nước rất tự do dân chủ. Và tôi mong rằng năm tới ngài đại sứ sẽ làm đại sứ cho một nước Việt Nam tự do không cộng sản nha. Và cảm ơn.
Some of the short translation. Mr. Ambassador, during the war, the people from South Vietnam believed that the U.S. is a righteous country. The U.S. Is fighting for the good cause. And now that we know that the communist regime in Vietnam have defamed the Republic of Vietnam, especially with the people saying that the Republic of Vietnam and the people of South Vietnam were fighting for, were puppets fighting for the Americans, not for themselves. So now that with the U.S. coming back to Vietnam, how do you ensure that the U.S. re-establish an image with the Vietnamese people that the U.S. government is a righteous country and will do the right thing and will restore the trust in the U.S. government?
Thank you. Cảm ơn có cảm thấy rất là sâu sắc ở đây, và tôi có thể I feel the sentiments that come with that question, and I thank you for your question. I think the way that we restore that image as a righteous country is that we do things together. We support Vietnam in dealing with health crises. We support Vietnam in dealing with crises in the environment, challenges in the environment. We choose to address our past honestly. We learn to trust one another by doing things together. You can't just talk. Talk is not enough. It's much better when you can actually act in ways that are collaborative. The United States policy is to support a strong, prosperous, independent Vietnam that respects the rule of law and human rights. We work together in all of those areas, strong, prosperous, independent Vietnam that respects the rule of law and human rights. I believe that's a balance that we can strike, and the way we can build the kind of trust that was lost is by doing things together to build that strong, prosperous Vietnam that respects the rule of law and human rights.
Điều bên xin cảm lời ý của Ngài Đại sứ là để chúng ta dùng lại cái niềm tin của người dân Việt Nam ở đất nước Hoa Kỳ, là bằng cách là chúng ta đất nước chính phủ Hoa Kỳ cùng người dân Việt Nam cùng làm việc chung với nhau, cũng như là cộng đồng chúng ta ở đây, và chúng ta và Hoa Kỳ sẽ đặt cái vấn đề để mà chính quyền Cộng sản Việt Nam phải tôn trọng những cái luật pháp, cũng như là tôn trọng những cái hiệp ước quốc tế mà họ đã cam kết, cũng như là chính cái hiến pháp của Việt Nam để bảo vệ cái quyền lợi của người dân Việt Nam. Xin cảm ơn quý vị. Và đây là câu hỏi.
Cùng đại sứ rất hân hạnh được gặp ông tại đây. Tôi là Trương Văn Sĩ, 19 năm 11 tháng phục vụ trong quân lực Việt Nam Cộng Hòa. Hiện tại bây giờ là chủ tịch của Liên minh Thế giới chống cộng 60 năm. Thưa ông đại sứ, theo lời đại sứ nói, ông rất hy vọng và ông tin tưởng rằng Cộng sản sẽ nghe cái gì ông nói và nghe cái gì của chính phủ Hoa Kỳ nói, hứa nhân quyền, hứa tự do, hứa đủ thứ. Xin ông trả lời giùm tôi, chừng nào ông trả lời câu hứa mà đem lại cho chúng tôi nghe hôm nay. Rất mong ngày sớm những cái gì nó hứa ông nên làm trước đi, chứ đừng nghe nó nói. Chúng tôi nghe nó nói rất phải ở đây này. Cảm ơn ông.
So Ambassador, do you need translation on that? Do you like some brief translation? Yeah. This Ambassador, the gentleman asked saying that it sounds from you that the government of Vietnam is willing to listen to what you and the U.S. government have to say about. Xin quý vị giữ im lặng dùm. That they are anxious to listen to what you and the U.S. government have to share with them in terms of what they need to do to move the country forward, to reform, some of that. Could you answer the question of where you think those things that you just talked about can be delivered, or do you he end by saying that they have trusted the communists too much and now they're here overseas, so they're asking you can you really trust the Vietnam government, and when can those things be realized?
The progress that I have seen in 20 years suggests to me we still have a long way to go, but if we look to the future, there's a possibility of much more progress. The recent decisions have accelerated progress towards more international integration, towards becoming part of the international community. I think the whole process is sped up in recent years, so I don't think it will take another 20 years to see the kind of progress that we're looking at. I think this year is a very, very important one. This year. I want to quote one thing that Congresswoman Sanchez mentioned my former boss, Pete Peterson. I know he's a friend of Congressman Rohrabacher, a friend of Congressman Royce. I don't know if you know Pete Peterson, a wonderful man, one of my heroes. He stood before a Vietnamese group in January, and he said, I want you to remember one thing. Nothing is impossible. And I think that's very powerful. If you decide there can't be any change, you can never trust people, there will never be progress, well then there never will be progress. But if you decide nothing is impossible and you go after it, then change is possible. Thank you.
Before the next question, I want to make a quick announcement. Trước câu hỏi tiếp tôi xin thông báo quý vị một điều là chúng tôi biết là ngày hôm nay cái thời gian rất là hạn hẹp, cho nên không thể nào nhận hết tất cả câu hỏi, cho nên văn phòng anh Lô Văn To đã có chuẩn bị những cái tấm kho như vậy. Nếu quý vị nào không có dịp để hỏi câu hỏi ngày hôm nay với ngài đại sứ, xin quý vị viết xuống tên, địa chỉ liên lạc của quý vị cũng như là câu hỏi của quý vị, và chúng tôi sẽ làm cái nhiệm vụ là chuyển những câu hỏi của quý vị đến ngài đại sứ
cũng như là các nhân viên của Bộ Ngoại giao để ngài đại sứ nhận được cái câu hỏi của quý vị, và chúng tôi xin cảm ơn. Và chúng tôi chỉ còn thời gian cho 2 câu hỏi nữa, và câu hỏi này xong rồi có một câu hỏi kế tiếp là xong. Chúng tôi xin phép quý vị.
Dạ, tôi xin được nói tiếng Việt, tại vì ở đây là những người mà những người ở đây đều là người Mỹ gốc Việt có phiếu, và chúng tôi muốn nói là chúng tôi có phiếu và chúng tôi nói thay cho những người thầm lặng không có mặt ở đây hôm nay. Tôi muốn nói, tại vì ở đây tôi biết tiếng Anh. Tôi muốn nói là tôi muốn hỏi một câu thôi, là chúng tôi đã nghe lạc quan nhiều lần rồi, mấy chục năm rồi. Bây giờ chúng tôi muốn bỏ phiếu cho những người mà sẽ thực hiện.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Donna. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Madam Senator, how's your campaign?
My campaign is going great. We just finished the first month of our campaign. We've been raising a lot of money so that we can communicate with people. I've been going up and down the state of California over and over again. We've been to San Jose, we've been with the Vietnamese community there, we have been to Sacramento, to San Francisco, to San Diego, to Imperial Valley, to Fontana, to Los Angeles. It's very exciting.
Madam Senator, the gas price come up every single hour. What do you plan to do if you are senator?
Yes, well, one of the things that I've done is stop driving so much because the gas price is going up so high. I think we need to make an investigation. It seems to me like California is the state where the highest gas prices. First thing I would do is to investigate what's going on.
You keep go and never give up. Is correct?
That's correct. You know, it's like this community. You know that you can make a difference and you continue to work at what you need to do, and that's the way I feel. I feel that we have a great campaign. I feel that the Vietnamese community has worked with me for 20 years, and I'm excited to be here with them today.
Thank you, Madam.
Thank you. Come on. Thank you.
I suggest PCR I'm working for BBC Vietnamese.
Oh, great.
And also the local TV here.
Okay.
And I got 2 questions for you.
Okay.
The first question, you said that we have a 20-year relationship with Vietnam government. But one other thing is that 20 years never visit. It's not about human rights, it's about business. People own the Vietnamese American here. They have a product produced in US, never allowed in Vietnam. And so how you can fight for that?
I agree. One of the problems that I've had with these trade agreements, whether it was with President Clinton when we did the mutual trade agreement or the WTO ascension or even now with the TPP, I have always been against them because what I see is that the products from Vietnam come here,
yes,
but the products that are here, that are made here, do not go into Vietnam. Or more importantly, we can read all the press we want about Vietnam from the Vietnam state, but not one of our newspapers can be sent and published in Vietnam. It's completely wrong.
So you said that you already announced that and you already mentioned it. But what about the U.S. government and the Obama government and even the ambassador there? Did you mention that and how we can work with that?
Yes, well, it's very apparent that the administration under President Obama wants this trade agreement. And this ambassador works for this president. That is why he is very positive about the trade agreement. But certainly, when you look at the editorials that I have done, when I've worked with the press, you understand that the human rights conditions are still very bad in Vietnam, and they're not tied to this new trade agreement.
Okay, another question is a couple days ago, when they have the meeting with the leader of the Vietnamese economy, and you have announced something, and you feel like that's for about what is going on in Vietnam and not like what you say, try to put for the human rights and for the structure in Vietnam. So in the last 48 hours, they have more harassment for dissidents. So if you know that information, how you can work and announce it?
Well, first of all, I would say to you that the head of the Communist Party is not a leader of that country. And I told President Obama it was wrong for him to meet with him. is not even a prime minister or a minister of foreign relations. That I believe that was wrong, and I signed a letter telling that to President Obama. That's the first thing. The second thing, as senator, the first thing that I would do in the United States Senate is to champion passing the Vietnam Human Rights Act. We have passed it over and over and over in the U.S. House of Representatives, but in the Senate it has been blocked. That would be one of my main things to do right away.
Okay, so how long does it take?
Well, U.S. Senate race is just 18 months away.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.